Fantastic. Super. So we have another one of our AEC sessions today. And so we're going to do a session called Project Delivery Methods. And we talked a little bit about this early on in the semester when we talked about how a project is delivered, as far as the different phases of design development, construction documents, construction, and moving on. But we're going to talk a little bit even deeper today. These could disappear. Nope. Not what I want. Okay. But anyway, just do it this way. It's all good. So this is kind of buildings go through basically a whole cycle. So you start with a programming phase, trying to figure out what you want in the building. A conceptual design phase that we talked about earlier, when you're just talking about where to place the building, how to orient the building. We talked a little bit about that and how LEED influences that, and how the sun shade and all those different factors. The climate can influence that, access can influence that. You get into a design where you're doing a detailed design, engineering analysis, then the construction documents. Again, so this is about maybe 5% of the effort, 5% of the effort, 10 to 15%. This is about 50% of the architect's actual effort. And then it goes to fabrication, where you're actually fabricating the pieces that you then bring to construction. So this is where the contractors spend about most of their time. Then you get into the actual construction logistics. You finish the buildings, you're operating and maintaining the building. So this phase may last 20 to 50 years, at which time you'll either do a renovation and then you'll start this whole process over again, or you decide to demolish the building. So that's really what we're going to be talking about today. We have, next slide. We've got me that's going to be talking today, so you know me. We've got Gio and Gerard that is with us. Gio is stepping in as senior project manager for Beck. So he's taking over the reins from Chris in the field. Chris is still really involved in the project. And then Gerard, who is also a USF graduate. He worked with us in our office, and being the late night architect that I am and the kind of guy he is, and he's got a couple little ones, he would come in late at night and work, and we would actually sit there and talk and have some really good discussions late at night. So, but he is moving up, incredibly talented guys, both of these are, and Gerard's going to make a difference in the world. So I'll let you guys introduce yourselves officially.
Awesome. Yes, we can do that. Stand, sit, doesn't matter.
You're fine.
I'll stand. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself, and then Gerard could do the same. So as Steve said, I'm a senior project manager with Beck. It's been 18 years since I graduated and started working for this company. I got my degree in construction science, and I got my master's in business administration. And I was kind of teetering what I wanted to do, and decided really construction. I like the hands-on aspect of what design and construction is, and being there consistently and seeing the progress of something coming together. So I enjoyed that, and I've been with Beck for 18 years. So long time. Gerard, you're up.
Hi everyone. My name is Gerard Cadet. You may recognize the accent of education in the Bahamas. That's where I'm from originally. I studied architecture in the Bahamas and then transitioned to Florida A&M. I studied construction engineering technology. And that's where I got to meet Gio as an intern. And then got hired on full time, worked for Beck for about 3 years. And then decided to make a crazy move to study engineering management. So I got to meet Steve Lafferty, got to work on a $150 million project at the hospital that he did during 2018. And I'm back with Beck as an assistant project manager. And looking forward to diving into some of the details with you guys.
All right. Thank you, guys. And Brian may or may not be joining us. He's not here with us yet, but he may or may not be joining us. He's been involved pretty well throughout the project. So what we're going to talk about today is some of the things that influence project delivery methods. How do we compare those different project delivery methods, the pros and cons of each, and then dive into some research actually about the project delivery method. What really does the research say, and how successful is each delivery method? So, Gio, why don't you take it on from here? So go ahead. Go ahead.
All right. Well, I may freelance a little here, guys. I may not necessarily follow the slides, but so when it comes to the project delivery method, how do you deliver a project, right? There's different methods in which you could do it. And all these methods also kind of depend on the type of project that you're doing, right? So for instance, if you're doing a renovation, say, of this room here, what delivery method would you choose? And there's various types, and they're not necessarily listed on this slide. But that could be as easy as issuing a lump sum contract. So are you guys familiar with that term and type of?
So why would it matter to these students you've got a lot of biochemistry, a lot of biology majors? Why would that really matter to these
Because they're
guys?
going to be responsible for budgets. You guys are responsible for budgets for your departments. And you're going to need to know how much funds do you guys have available to do a renovation of the office or the lab spaces, right?
Yeah, so let me give you some examples, right? So we've worked with Tampa International Airport. We've worked with Tampa General Hospital. We've worked with the school district. We've worked with, well, University of South Florida, along with other universities. And we've done retail work as well. And so there's end users, there's owners, there's clients that they have certain expectations, right? And I could tell you at the airport, the expectation is that they want passengers to get to their flight, to the jetway quickly, efficiently, comfortably, and they want them to exit the plane and get back to their car in the same manner, right? So there's a lot of focus, and they literally count the number of steps you take to get to that plane. Now, there's a group of people who make decisions on a project there, right? There's people from marketing. There's people from retail and concessions. There's people who are customer focused, right? So they look at a lot of social media, a lot of surveys. And so, you know, a lot of times you think like construction, engineering, architecture, it doesn't really impact me. But you may find yourself in one of these selection groups at some point in your career, right? Same thing with Tampa General Hospital, right? A couple of years ago, we renovated 20 plus surgical suites over there. And we've renovated doctors' offices as well. Well, there's input that they provide for their specialty as to how they want those rooms designed. And it's amazing how much freedom those doctors are given to say, this is how I want my surgical suite to look, right? And same thing here at USF Honors. There's Dean Adams. I assume you guys know him. Right, yes, I'm sure you guys do. You know, it's interesting. He walks the building every so often, and just recently he made a couple of changes to the building because he's thinking about the programming of the building. You guys coming in and getting that experience within the classroom, within all those rooms that have unique specialty activities such as audio visual, television, the music room, the art room, the food studio, right? All of those are getting special input from those end users, which at one point, maybe you guys. So I don't know if that's where you were headed, Steve.
Yep.
Okay.
That was it. So
You guys have any questions on that section so far?
So as you get into the point where you're a decision maker in your company, in your firm, in your doctor's practice, in your whatever, you're going to be looking at what is really important to me. And those decisions, what is important to me, really helps shape even the delivery process that you select for a particular project. So one organization, the FMI, I believe it is, the Facilities Management Incorporated, they surveyed a whole bunch of people, and on a scale of 1 to 5, what were the most important decision factors that clients used when they were looking at how to deliver a project? And it came down to delivery schedule, the owner's projects and objectives, the experience of the contractor, and the initial cost. So also was a project complexity and innovation, the staff experience and the availability of the owner, the project type, the level of design completion, the initial project assessment, legal and regulatory requirements, lifecycle costs, and third-party agreements. So as we start talking about the different delivery methods, think about how these factor in, and we'll get into detail on each one. How about those factor in? And so we'll actually give you a copy of this presentation afterwards, so you can download it. But yes, definitely take notes and do that, because certainly you learn better, and there will be a quiz. So the delivery methods that are most prevalent in the United States, what they call the traditional method is what they call the design bid build, or the DBB. So that's where you hire the architect, he designs it, he puts it out to bid, and the bid is what it is, and then the contractor builds it. You know, there's a great quote from, I think it was John Glenn, who said, oh, am I not sharing the screen? Shame on me. And so that's probably going to affect our recording, but that's okay.
It does fun.
That's okay. It is what it is. Anyway, so John Glenn, eventually a senator, said as he's sitting on getting ready to go jump in a rocket, how do you feel about this experience? He goes, well, how would you feel if you're getting ready to jump on top of a giant explosive device that's built by the lowest bidder?
Okay.
So, but that's one of the basis of our American economy, is that you know, anybody can step up, anybody can make it in the United States, because everybody has that opportunity. And it's that competitive economy that really drives a lot of the US economy. But with that, there's some drawbacks to that. We'll get into that. So then a development method called construction manager at risk with an architect. So you still have, here you have a contract, the owner has a contract with the architect, the owner has a contract with the construction manager. You have the same thing with a design construction manager, except the architect and the construction manager are hired at the same time. Whereas here, you hire the architect first, then you select a contractor based on the lowest bid. Here, you bring a contractor in at the same time, and then they work together through the design and through the construction documents. You do competitive bidding to the subcontractors, and that's actually how the way the Honors College is actually being delivered. There's another approach that's really good for smaller projects where you're just replacing a piece of equipment. It's called a job order contracting. Basically, it's a service that surveys construction costs across the United States and then modifies that for a locality. And you can hire the contractor based on, this is what this project ought to cost. Those costs are adjusted on an annual basis, and then you just go in, you say, this is it. So it's a very quick way to get, you don't really have a lot of design. You're just replacing equipment, very quick to get to completion. Okay, you can see the design bid build is the longest duration, construction management is shortest, and then a qualification-based design build, which Beck is really known for because they try and bring everything in-house. You have one team, the owner contracts with one contract for the architect and the contractor. So as they say, as I sometimes affectionately say, we have one throat to choke. But it's one point of responsibility. So you've got one point to look at. I don't have to play marriage counselor as the owner sometimes here, where you've got to negotiate between two different contracts. So, but all methods have a competitive bidding component where you're bidding it to the subcontractors. All components have a direct, you see there is a difference in the schedule for each one, and there's different contracting methods. Now there's one more project delivery method that's starting to emerge in our society. I didn't document it, but it's called the integrated project delivery method. And it's not really legal for public clients, but the healthcare sector, especially hospitals, are starting to utilize this basically as an opportunity to reduce risk, to develop a real partnering process. So that's where you don't even have one contract between the owner and architect. You have one contract for everybody. And instead of this group having basically one pot of money to manage, and then the owner being able to manage the budget, they put it all together, everything is transparent, and they all share in the profits or the losses of the project. So, but we won't, that's coming down the road. That's not really here yet, but it's something that might happen in the future. It's gaining some traction. So I'm not gonna read all of this. There's a lot of words, way too many words for a PowerPoint slide, but
You have a great photo of this later on,
okay.
folks.
Oh, yes, yeah.
That's a story.
So, yeah, so there's some story, but basically, again, it's the John Glenn story. You have an architect and a contractor, or an architect and a team of engineers to do the design. They kind of design in a vacuum. Architects, and I can say this because I are one, architects have a sense, good architects have a sense of what things cost, but they're not monitoring costs on a daily basis like contractors are. They don't have their finger on the pulse of what the economy is really doing. And sometimes, and I'll say this too, sometimes younger architects don't understand totally how projects fit together and get built together. So there's some misunderstanding. They may design something that could be done much more simply with the input of somebody that has done it before. I'll just say it like that. Same thing with engineers. They can design something that can be very complex or very simple, and there may be another way to accomplish the same thing a little bit more economically. So that's you lose that. You lose that no contractor input during the design phases. Sometimes you have to actually bring in a cost estimating consultant to help the architect understand what the project really costs. A lot of times when you're doing a competitive bid, the owner doesn't have a lot of input in who the subcontractors actually get selected. That may or may not matter to some people. Again, look back at the decision points and what is important to you. If you're an owner that's not really involved, you're building a warehouse and you really don't care who the electrician is, that's okay. If you're building a hospital, it's pretty important to know who the electrician is. You want to make sure there's a lot of coordination and a lot of hand holding there.
And the challenge with this too is, you go through all that effort in designing and bidding, only to find out it's over budget. Now you have to start the cycle all over again, so that's
there's
a big
nasty
challenge.
Yeah, a nasty word called value engineering, but you're actually taking value out of the building a lot of times. But it's okay, what can we change out of the scope or the quality to bring the project within budget? So that's a real challenge, especially in today's very volatile market for materials and everything. This is also the most inefficient method of contracting because you have multiple general contractors. So we recently put a project out to bid like this. We had 8 general contractors. So think it probably took them $15,000 to $20,000 to bid that project. So we received 8 bids. So you've got 8 contractors spending $15,000 to $20,000 just on the opportunity to get that project. Now they've got to make up that money somehow. Hopefully they get it on the next project, but it means that they've got to increase their margin, their profit margin on that next project to pay for the overhead of all of their estimators.
So Steve, I think we did a project, I want to say about 10 years ago with USF that was not necessarily a design bid to general contractors and then build, but it was a similar type scenario. It was the sterilization suite at USF Camels downtown.
Mm-hmm.
I was a part of that job, and I walked in around this time in the project. So the programming with USF and the medical personnel, that was all done. The design was put together. My company's pre-construction department, they put the bids together. So then when I showed up, in a lot of instances on design, bid, build projects, the contractor shows up and he's handed an instruction book, if you will, or drawings. It's very prescribed, right? This is what you're going to build and you're going to stick to this and it's exactly this, right? And that's why we write lump sum contract agreements, because I agree to deliver exactly what's on these instructions, and USF committed to paying me a certain amount. And I know you're going to get to this, but the sterilization suite was no bigger than maybe twice this room. So for that particular project, it made sense to go with that delivery method versus other types of delivery methods, which I'm sure you're going to get to.
So also it's important on the onset of any project, kind of assess the different project delivery method to determine what's going to be the best option for my team and in order to occupy the space. So earlier, the better to have this conversation in the process.
We'll get in a little bit some of the pros and cons and what the research says about this delivery process a little bit later. But we'll jump to design and construction manager at risk. And so again, this is how the Honors College is being delivered. One of the things that I kind of say about this in comparing this and design build is yes, with the design build, there's not a lot of companies out there like Beck that have architects and engineers in-house and the contract construction done in-house. A lot of times what you'll see an architectural and engineering team pair up with a contracting team. It may or may not be the first time they've worked together, but at least having them under one contract, I, as the owner, don't necessarily have to play marriage counselor. They're under contract with me for one person or one group. They have to fight it out amongst themselves, but
Hug it out.
yeah, hug it out themselves. There you go. But when you have an architectural team and a construction team teaming up, chances are you're gonna either get the absolutely best architect you possibly can and a really good contractor, or you're gonna get the absolutely best contractor for the project and a pretty good architect. Your chances are you're not gonna be able to select the best of the best. In this scenario, you're guaranteed, because as the owner, we can select the very best architect that we want, which we did with Morphosis and Fleischman and Garcia. And the very best contractor that we could possibly find for this particular project, which was Beck. Yeah, we've had to play marriage counselor and hug it out every once in a while. But we have the best of both worlds. So that is one of the real advantages to this. And I'll let you guys, one of you guys attack some of the
Okay,
some of the pros and cons
so,
of this.
you know, the honors project is a design CM at risk. Just to give you an idea, I've come in somewhere around here, right? But Chris Clater, who was the original senior project manager, he started over here, and so he's built a relationship with USF, with the design team, right? And so that design team consists of a really well-known architect for doing very organic buildings, Morphosis architects, right? And then we also used a local architect, Fleischman Garcia, Maslowski. I always forget that. But FGM, right? A local architect, and so they partnered up, and so working together, we've worked on the design and construction documents. Now, what do you think are the advantages between, like Steve was saying, getting the CM early, partnering up, building that relationship with USF, with the end users, such as Dean Adams, such as the students, such as the professors? What's the advantage of getting the CM back, if you will, here versus here? Yes.
Page, and it saves time, and it saves, I guess, maybe even like money. You can plan things out further in advance and stuff like that, having everyone on board at the beginning.
Absolutely. I think one of the big things we do is bring the constructability factor in, right? A lot of times, like you were saying, Steve, there's designs that are put together, and Morphosis, they're incredible at putting these designs. Who's here been through the Honors College?
They all have.
They all have. Okay, awesome. So their design lets in a lot of lighting. There's a lot of bends and this and that, right? And so there's unique ways you have to erect that structure, right? You can't necessarily do it multiple ways. There's just a handful in certain instances of how that structure comes together.
Basically, because this component has to be installed before this component can be installed, before this component could be installed.
Right.
And that's kind of.
Right, there's a
Interesting.
sequence, a constructability sequence, right? That sometimes through the filter of a builder, we see that. But through the eyes of an architect, they just see that final aesthetic, beautiful product, right? They're not seeing how it gets put together. So there's a lot of advantages to bringing a CM early. But at the same time, we're two different groups, the builders and the architects, right? And so what Steve's talking about, marriage counseling, I'll share a little secret with you. With Beck, sometimes we're like that, where Brian Wilson has to play marriage counselor because the architects go to that side of the room and the builders come over here and we just go at each other. And so enter the owner, and he has to massage the situation, right? And so we do that internally. And then when we get to design and build, I'll share a little bit more about well, Gerard probably can on that aspect on the more internal, but this is a great method, very similar to design build.
And also, just before construction, you're talking about the CM selection and going into the design phase. You guys, as the end users, were a part of the initial design, right? Talking about material selection, carpet and furniture and artwork, etc. So before we get into the nuts and bolts of the design aspect, you guys' input and feedback was very much a part of the design process, so that we know what was the energy that we needed to exude in doing the design. Offices relied on you guys going into the board and writing dynamic or writing a certain type of color or a certain type of feel that you want to experience in different spaces, right? So those are some of the items that were the motivation behind the design and the results that we're seeing right now.
And you hit on a real important point about the communication early on in the project. So getting everybody all on the same page early on in the project. So that design and construction document, so the design is, as we've seen in some of the discussions in the class, a lot of that design happens up here, but it somehow needs to get communicated from the architect's brain to the contractor's brain. And that happens with construction documents in the form of drawings and specifications. If you're doing a low bid project or a competitive bid project, that communication has got to be very, very explicit, because you've got 10 different contractors looking at it. And if two contractors look at it a different way, they're going to end up bidding it differently. Whereas here, in a construction management, again, you've got meeting minutes, you've got everybody on the same page. There may not have to be as many drawings, as much specificity, and that all turns up to dollars. So you may not have to spend as much on the architect and engineering doing a super duper complete set of drawings for a competitive bid project, as opposed to a good set of drawings for a construction management contract, or at least the subcontractors can do it. And then some of the gaps can be filled in by meetings or communications. So here we're going to jump, and I'm going to jump down 2 slides, jump over job board of contracting and jump down to design build. And again, this is where, yes, ma'am.
So because BEC is composed of architects and construction managers, and both sides are used to working with each other more than you would be in another project delivery method, did you find the architects at Morphosis to be a little harder to work with?
There's a loaded question. That's a good question.
Extremely good question. The longer, you know, when you find yourself in a good team, you kind of know each other's moves, right? And you become more effective, right? It's kind of like, you know, we do team building type stuff. And so Beck, we've done dragon boats. Do you guys know what that is? It's kind of like rowing, but with like 16 people in the boat and you all have to synchronize and it's a bunch of different people. And so because we've worked together for so many years, like when I get a certain architect, I know the type of product he's going to deliver, right? I know how he's going to react when I ask a question. I know the very detailed solution he's going to give me, and because of his experience level, he's going to cover all aspects of that response, right? And so because of that, internally, when the right individuals are put into that team, we move quickly, right? Morphosis, we aren't familiar with them. This is the first time we've worked with them, right? So that relationship started to build, right? And then we started figuring out, okay, you know, this is a bit more of a technical question. It isn't something that this individual necessarily wants to answer because this is an office area type question. And office area type questions get resolved by this architect, and she's quick. So we're going to go to her. But this question has the whole aesthetic of this area. So now we have to go to this architect, and he's going to take a little bit longer. So we have to come to him sooner so that to give him time to respond. And so those are the things we have to be adjusting for on those projects. I could understand why, you know, when it's an art piece, basically the honors college, right? It has so many turns, it's so beautiful. And when the finishes start arriving, which they have, when you see it all come together, you'll realize how much thought was put into it by this New York architect and why it takes sometimes a little bit longer than what we would prefer to get those responses. But it's important to keep the integrity and the aesthetic of that building. I don't know if I answered your question. I ranted there a little.
But that's a challenge on every project, right? You know, Steve showed the first slide where you go through selling process before you get to the construction side, right? So you would have spent a year and a half maybe designing and programming the honors college, right? As an intern, if you will, while studying, taking my master's here, I was a part of the programming process. So that was at least a year and a half before we actually started construction, right? So I say that to say you would have gone through the different phases in building a relationship with the owner, building a relationship with you guys, faculty, et cetera, to kind of get the spirit of the building, right? And then all of a sudden, as soon as Steve make a stroke of the pen, all of a sudden, Beck and Morphosis are now partners, right? So when do you have time to build that culture? When do you have the time to build that team? Right? So it's almost like, you know, you're thrown out of an airplane with a parachute and you still have to put your shoes on, right? But you still have to get it on. If not, you know, it's going to be a full disaster, right? So as you go down this spiral, if you will, you have to put yourself together, put your shoes on, put your parachute on, and go down in an area that is more in sync with the team. So throughout the process, now that we're doing the design, now that we're in the construction side, you know, we're communicating with each other, we're learning the moves of each other in order to facilitate and meet the design. So, and you're going to find that in every aspect of projects that you might be in. How do you develop the team and build a culture that could cooperate with each other?
You know, one last thing too.
A good operating room has that same dynamic.
Mhm.
You get to know the people in the operating room with you. You know, in a marketing firm, you get to know who's going to be the creative person, who's going to get the job done, and who's going to make sure that the printing comes off right or the web page comes off right. It's in an engineering office, architecture office. It's that same team building that happens regardless of what industry you're in. It's
And for us, back, we call it, alignment session, just kind of understanding the different style of the different individuals, the different temperament of the different individuals. So, person A needs to adjust how they approach person B because of conflict that might arise, right? So you kind of find, so as quick as you can, establish alignment to understand how do we work together as a team.
One great thing about the honors team is that the architect, a lot of times the architect, because he's the general, if you will, and he manages the mechanical engineer, the interior architect, the electrical engineer, the civil engineer, all these designers, right? If there's a question to be asked, it has to go through the architect. And then the architect funnels it to his team, right? What's great about our honors team is that we built a strong relationship with the architect to where he's like, call whoever you want on my team, just keep me informed. And that makes things go quicker, right? Because it's not going through a funnel. In any team, if you could build that trust to go and talk to anybody, the confidence builds within the team and things get done quicker.
You want to talk about the design build approach as a true design build approach?
Yes,
That's the benefit, right, of an integrated type of job, right? I could piggyback off of him.
Okay, yes. So design build, right? This situation, like Steve was saying, is much better for the owner. And someone who's been doing it for a while is Tampa International Airport, right? And I've been there, I've worked there for 7 years under a design build contract, 2 of them. And Gerard was there for 3 years.
3 years.
Yeah. And so it's definitely true that life is much easier as an owner when you only have one contract, right? And I'll give you a really good example of the advantages of a design build. Now, so let me ask the question first. What do you think would be the advantage to an owner on a design build versus, say, a design bid build or a design CM? Easy because we've done it. But okay, I'll give you a good example, right? So in a room such as this, there's a lot of programming that goes that is involved in it, right? The position of the lights and how much lumens go into the area so you guys could see it right.
How much light you need.
Exactly how much light you need. You also have fire alarm, you have Wi-Fi, and there's all sorts of different systems that go in there, right? Well, if Steve had a contract with the architect is responsible to coordinate that whole effort, right? And the architect gives us the instructions and we go and do exactly what the architect wants. If there's something missing, which there's a couple of things missing at honors in terms of low voltage, which is fire alarm, which is Wi-Fi, which is DAS, right? It's hard to capture all those things on a drawing, right? So there's always aspects that are missing, right? So when those come up, we go through an exercise of let's document what's missing, let's go and get approval, and then we'll go ahead and proceed and do the work, right? Whereas in a design build contract, this is what the airport does to us, right? They're like, wait, so you're telling me your architect missed it. He didn't get it all in the drawings. So it sounds like it's your problem and you need to go solve your problem. And that's the extent of what they do. And so it's completely on us because it's one contract and we said we would do everything, the design. As long as the scope doesn't drastically change, we are responsible for all of that, right? And it's our problem to figure out, our challenge to figure out with our team. Whereas in a different sort of contract such as here, we have to go verify, hey, owner, USF, were these additional changes, do they need to occur? And if they do we have approval to proceed and make these changes? Right? And so documentation needs to occur and verification needs to occur. Not so the case at the airport. They like that scenario because less management for them, right? They gave us the programming standards and we're responsible, even though maybe there was some ambiguity, we're responsible for it. You want to talk about the culture side of it?
Yeah, so I mean, to that point, you know, is you have two sides of this equation. And while it's difficult, I mean, for us to have to go back and now have this conversation with the architect, oh, you missed the lights, you didn't add the fire alarm, etc. The architect is gonna pause, like, you're part of this effort, like redesign this together, right? So the good part about us putting our heads together is like we start to collaborate more, right? So you now instead of trying to call the architect is sitting right next to me. So we can have a conversation about what is missing, what could we do to solve the problem. So we're able to find a solution much quicker. And even though it may not be a zero cost, but we find a solution that is more palatable for the client, right? So culture, relationship building is critical a part of that process, right? So I began to form a solid relationship with the architect because she is always there. If there's a question, if there's a challenge, we can have those resolved almost immediately. So
One thing to remember is that those drawings that are drawn, the engineering that's done, the specifications that are written, those are written by people, and people are not perfect. So there has never been a perfect set of drawings. So you've got to anticipate that there will be imperfections, there will be misses, there will be gaps, there will be some things. So figure you're going to have some, I say, bumps in the road. You're going to have some bumps in the road. Anticipate the bumps in the road. Put some contingency aside for issues to come up because they will come up.
I mean, even on the
throughout the process.
Even on the owner side, sometimes they may miss. Sometimes they may need an additional ad that was not a part of the contract, right? We can't say, oh, it was in a part of the design, tough luck. No, we have to pause and reevaluate and get together with the architect and decide how we're gonna move forward, make sure that, they're satisfied.
So one of the disadvantages, I would say, sometimes with design builder is we as an owner put so much responsibility and we hand over so much responsibility to the designers and the architects to say, this is what we want and we expect it to be there. Sometimes it doesn't always get there, or we may not pay as much attention to some of the details as we might have if we had to know that we had to cross-check everything. So a lot of times also, because just the way construction is, it is, as I say, the one with the gold makes the rules. So in construction, an architect's fee is 8 to 10 to 12% of the project. The other 90%, 88% is on the contractor side of the project. So they've got to be able to have the deep pockets to be able to finance this big project. The architect, because they're only getting paid 10%, never really builds their bank account up high enough where they can finance a project like that. So you end up 99% or 90% of the time, a design build contract is led by the contractor. And then the architect and the engineers work for the contractor. So if a lot of those decisions are being made by the contractors, by the design build team, the owner may not have visibility, they may not have awareness of some of the decisions that are being made until we're walking through the building and saying, oh, what's that? I thought I was getting X and you put Y in there.
Yeah,
So-
you are correct, Steve. And so following the example of Tampa International, right? And it goes right here, the architect's role as an advocate for the owner may be diminished. It is diminished because now they work for the contractor, right? And a lot of times it's like, hey, you know, before you guys go, before a professor or a teacher, if it's a group project, you guys get together and talk about what you're gonna say and what you're not gonna say, right? Well, we do too as well. Like anybody would. I'm sure Steve does it. We all have bosses, right? So you all get together, it's like, okay, what are we gonna share? And what do we need to continue to work on? And maybe we'll hold back, right? The architect is part of those conversations. So what the owner does, again, going back to Tampa International Airport, they hire a third-party owner's representative, right? And so this third party, and it could be a company like Beck as well, but not on that project, that would be a conflict of interest. But they would go hire another GC or a consultant to be their owner's rep, to be in those meetings with Beck so that he has eyes and ears on the project, right?
And it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. It's not necessarily mean that we're hiding anything, right?
Right.
As from the owner perspective, you know, the owner has to believe that that we have their best interests at hand. And as a contractor with integrity, man, that is what we're gonna deliver. But on the owner perspective too, they're again looking at us as this group will do the right thing. I don't need to know all of the details, but I'll trust and I'll press on them for the delivery that we ask for. Right? So then that makes it a good challenge for the architects and the builder to come up with a solution that satisfies the client. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. Again, it's how you communicate these challenges. That's why, you know, having a strong culture and team alignment early on is critical.
So as we turn the corner and start looking at the research, what are the benefits and drawbacks for each? We kind of compared them, but what does the research really say? And so digging into it, there's a lot of research that says, you know, design, bid, build works great for fairly simple projects, works fairly well for projects that are very well defined. But as you get more complex, that collaboration, and that really is where the world is going. You know, that's what makes the Honors College what it is that collaboration, that richness that then you guys have even said it in the class. It's that richness of having the marketing majors with the biochemistry majors, with the engineering majors, all talking to each other. You bring different perspectives. And so as a result, in today's economy, the construction management at risk and design build forms of contracting are becoming a lot more prevalent. So also, as you start looking at it, the contract, while the initial contract may be the same, you may sign a contract at $40 million. Chances are, when you have a design bid build based on a low bid, the contractor is giving you a lump sum, but anything that may not be on those drawings ends up being an add to that particular contract. On the design build side, we pay for what we want, and chances are they're going to be able to find some economies somehow. So you end up with a leveling where the low bid project may be the lowest first cost, but by the end of the project, it may be more expensive actually than the other. And so this is kind of why. And so some historical stuff. So, all right, so your original contract is here, and you know, the contractor is making his profits off the change orders. So a study of 835 projects. So the number of change orders for design bid build project, you had a lot more change orders for that type of project delivery than you do for design build delivery. You end up with, this is the actual difference. So in green is a design build. In the other color, the gold color, is what a similar contract value is for a design bid build. You end up with a lot more contracts. And as a result, a lot of times the designers will build to the budget. The low bid comes in at the budget, but then all of those additional changes, the fact that the drawings aren't perfect and never will be perfect, add those change orders on top of that, and you end up with a lot more traditional low bid projects coming in higher than the anticipated budget. So on the design build side, you've got another 835 projects. We said that design build provided better results in 5 out of 6 categories. That one category was, forget what it was, but the biggest difference between the two is the fact that a design build is a much shorter duration. And you saw that on one of the first slides. It's a shorter duration getting from point A to point B. That's what study B really showed. And so we did some research on our projects and actually said, okay, what are some of the projects that we actually did here at USF? And these were the GMP, stands for guaranteed maximum price. So this is what the contract we signed with the different contractors. And at the end of the project, there was savings actually returned back to USF, which you would not have if it was a design bid build. All of this profit would go right into the contractor's pocket. Okay. As an aside, also, we were able to increase some of the scope, so add some things to the project that we didn't think we were going to be able to actually afford as a part of that project during the later on when we actually saw some of the economies. We also had some criticism that, all right, because we're negotiating the fees up front, and you know you're going to get the lowest percentage. You're going to get the best cost with a low bid. Okay? But when you actually look at it, we've been pretty fortunate in how we've been able to negotiate some of the fees for some of our projects. So for our benchmarks, if you look at the industry benchmark, the contractors making about 5% just profit into their pocket, a 10% profit, 5% to cover their overhead, which is their cost of their general office and stuff like that. And then general conditions, which is the cost of the office trailer, all of the stuff that goes into producing the project, ends up being about 25%. We've been pretty successful in negotiating significantly less than that, just at USF. Not because we beat them up, but just because we've been fortunate. So if we summarize it all, this is kind of the pros and the cons for each of the 3 delivery processes. You've got a selection process. The design bid build, low bid, you're selecting the most qualified for both the construction manager and the architect. Or same thing with design build, with the job order contracting, you've actually got a list of contractors you can go to. How is the accounting done? Does the owner have visibility to actually what the project actually costs? In the design bid build, no. The contractor has all of that kind of behind his curtain, and the owner never really gets to see what the cost of the project really is. Whereas these other three opportunities, yes, you do. What kind of relationship does the architect and the contractor have? In the original approach, it is very adversarial because you've got the architect saying, I had it on the drawings, it was there, you ought to know it, it was there, build it. And the contractor say, well, your drawings suck, they're no good, there are things missing, and you've always got that constant adversarial relationship. Yes.
So the cons, what are the benefits to design bid build?
A lot of times it is considered, and sometimes you can get the lowest price. If you have a really good set of drawings, you've got a really good set of communications and a good scope, especially for a simple project, you can get the best price because you're going out to multiple contractors, multiple subcontractors, the whole marketplace, and getting the best price all the way across the board.
So to give you an example, right? So a Home Depot or Lowe's, right? Home Depot builds
They're called big boxes.
big boxes, right?
That's
They
what they are.
hardly do any changes, right? This is exactly what we want. They don't see any changes in the future, right? So they may choose the design bid build, they often do, because they want that low price because they know there aren't going to be that many changes later on. There's nothing special about a big box, right? Same thing with, say, certain Publixes, like CVS or Walgreens, right? They're basically all the same type of design. And so, you know, that
Especially if you're building them from a prototype set of drawings where you've gone through a couple projects, you've identified where the gaps are in the drawings, you fix them, and then you've got a almost perfect set of drawings that you can then say, okay, this is exactly what I want, build this, and nobody has any questions, you can get the very best price.
right. I'll give you an example of a project I've worked on. Who here grew up in Riverview area? Okay, did you go to Newsom High School? Okay, so the school district, right? They wanted to save some money. So they built Newsom High School in Riverview. And then they decided, hey, it's such a great design, and to save some money, let's build the same exact high school over in Ruskin, and that became John I. Leonard High School. But if you walk through both campuses, the only difference is really the colors. And it was the school district's way of saving money so that they could use, you know, the extra funds elsewhere, and they competitively bid that. So that's an example of where that delivery method would be effective.
So think of a Chick-fil-A, all Wendy's, same design, just different plot line, easy. I don't know, how would that work with like a renovation? That could be a little challenging, right?
Yeah,
It can be.
Yeah.
it can be. Yeah.
It can be. So, and I think may have showed this before. This is just for your information, put it in the back pocket, but knowing where the actual work is for an architect as opposed to a contractor. The time that they spend, this is the design, this is the thought process that they're actually doing. The major effort is putting together those construction documents, figuring out how it's going to be built, and then communicating that to a contractor. And so that's one of the areas where I think the construction industry in the future is really gonna look to economize. You look at the construction industry, and technology has made all kinds of improvements. Medicine has made all kinds of improvements. Manufacturing, engineering have dramatically made improvements in economies and economies of scale. The construction industry has lagged a lot in the increase because it is so labor intensive, and we don't build things again and again and again. Every project is unique, every group is unique, and it's
you're
so
talking-
labor intensive.
You're talking about a productivity factor of less than 1%, over the past, 50 years or so. And if we could even improve, just a portion of that, based on McKinsey report, they're talking about $1.6 trillion being pumped into the economy just by improving that factor. So there's a lot of room for growth in the construction side of things.
So, and then these last two slides are just some of the references that are footnoted there for you in your future when and if you may need to come back and look at some of this. So, was this helpful? Did it help you understand what's going on with in the future? It's just one of those things that, I say as you're walking down the road and you find a cool looking stone, you pick it up and put it in your pocket, because you may use it later. You may find it useful later. You may not use it right now. You may not use this information for 10 years, but I guarantee you sometime you'll find this important, and you'll be able to use it, some of that knowledge in a different aspect too. What are the questions you got? What do you think was most interesting?
I call it names. For you.
Can you talk a little bit on teamwork within your team? Because we heard about relationship, the clients, architects, and you also have, like architects, a whole set of the consultants. But you have a whole set of subcontractors, and you have the whole sequence, supply chain, all kinds of issues you have to deal with. How do you work?
So let me toss out a nugget, and then what we talked about earlier, and then you guys can kind of finish it. But it really is any project, any team has some certain dynamics, and you can look this up, and it's called the Tuckman model. But it's really interesting that every team will go through what they call a forming, a storming, a performing stage. So you have an initial phase where you form the team. You don't know each other. You don't know how things are going to work. But then you get to a point where you're starting to build a team, and there becomes some conflict, and you've got to work through some things. You can either do the marriage counselor, hug it out, whatever it is, but you're gonna have some storms in that process. Once you work through that, you learn how people work. And I think Beck of a lot of contractors in this area who really understand this better than a lot of other contractors. That process, that it takes some intentional work to get through that storming phase, to get through that performing phase, where you're running a 440. You have that start, you're really running hard, and then you hit your stride. That's when you start to perform. And then something happens where one of those team members leaves and brings in somebody else. Now you're starting to reform that team and go through the restorming process. It goes kind of cyclical. So we have a project that I happen to be kicking off tomorrow. And somebody decided it would be a really good idea to hire an outside. Just put it out there, to hire some outside attorneys to draft up a contract for this particular project. And so before we get started, the university is going to present the design build team with an 88-page contract to set the ground rules for our relationship. Me standing back here saying, is that really the best way to start a relationship?
Prenup.
Yeah, it starts with a prenup. There's that, okay, I kind of trust you, but I'm moving like this. Some of us would rather just say, okay, we are a team, let's go through the storming, because ultimately, if you have to come back to the words in the contract, something's gone way wrong and it's too far down the road to fix anyway. You gotta fix it before it gets to that point. So with that, the intentionality, I'm gonna turn it over to you guys and say, what do you all do to intentionally create your teams?
And, before we start a project, we would take these assessments. And Joe, I don't remember like what your results were, but you take these assessments to kind of assess your personality, et cetera. And so for example, so once I took this assessment, it came out that I'm a strategist, all right? So I have the ability to communicate, I can work by myself, work with a team, and just kind of work with different groups to get certain things done. And I want what I want, what I wanted, all right? So, and then it kind of talk about what would disappoint me, like if I hand you an assignment to help fulfill, and you didn't fulfill that, then that kind of gets me agitated, then I want to take it on my own and just kind of run with it, all right? So then you look at the group as a whole, and let's say Gio was, I don't know, was it a maverick or some sort, like he does his own thing, right? So you would kind of know the type of groups you would assign to Gio. At least what I'm getting at is it's important to be aware of some of your strengths and some of the things that you may find challenging, all right? Not that you would avoid those at any cost, but you would develop the tools to work through those difficult parts and those difficult challenges. Because we don't always get to pick who we work with or people that we like, et cetera. But having that awareness and understanding of the different personality types would help us to meet the project objective, the project goals. So you don't have to like work with me, but we just need to understand what's the project goals and what's the objective, right? See, everyone, when we started working together, I don't remember the details of it, but I remember there was a list of things like Steve would talk about for the department, right? Those are the things that would motivate us, that we will think about when we're going through a difficult patch throughout the project. And just like on our jobs, like there is a mantra, there is something that you have to go after. Being on the airport project now, our mantra is clients delight, right? So whenever there's something we didn't quite really want to do and wasn't expecting, but we know we have to do it, we just said client delight, right? So automatically that gives you a different feel, a different spirit. We have to get this right. We have to work together to make it happen, right? So alignment early on in the process, understanding your teams and how we work together is very important. So.
I recall back when I was in graduate school, in the business graduate school, first 2 quarters, we got assigned our student teams, right? And then for the rest of the year, we could decide who we wanted on that team, right? And so after the first 2 quarters, we didn't keep that team. We went to the people that we enjoyed working with, right? Who we knew that, hey, when the time comes, they're going to perform, right? Or it wasn't necessarily just our friends, right? But some of them were friends. But the point I'm trying to get to is that internally, with Beck and really most industries, I would think, you want to work with people that you know you're going to be successful with, you're going to perform well with, right? So when Beck puts together these teams. Like Gerard was saying, there's a lot of personality assessments that are done. So we put the right people together, so that they start to,
Use the Tuckman model, start to form and a norm, build it.
Right. Instead of conflicting, they start to sync, right? And then you start to get more of your friends together. So for instance, our subcontractors, right? We have the concrete subcontractor, the plumber, the electrician, so on and so forth. Same thing with the design teams, right? And we have go-tos, right? Because we know, hey, this company over here, they're gonna perform, right? And we need this project here. The time frame is so short that we cannot waste time. So we need high performers. So let's go get this company, right? We'll figure it out. We may pay a little bit more for this company, but they're going to help us get to that finish line. And so that's how we kind of compose that team. Now, like Gerard was saying, you can't get top notch all the time. Sometimes, you don't. And so we help those other groups through the process, right? And so that's all part of the whole dynamic, right? But I think, at least for me, one of the most important things is that the core group, along with the owner, a lot of times we think of these groups as, hey, it doesn't involve the owner because, hey, it's his project and he's just like, it's for him. No, he's a big part of these decision makings and the timeliness of the decisions, getting paid, and all those sort of things. He's part of they are part of the team as well. And so it all goes to, like you were saying, the importance of that team and making sure that it works together.
And being emotionally intelligent too, that's key.
So Brian actually said something on the phone to me the other day that really is sticking with me. So let me answer. When is the last time either of you held a hammer, a saw, or a screw gun?
But it wasn't on the job.
It wasn't on the job. Okay,
I just held the tape, just to measure a window. That was last week.
because you were happy to be there. Okay, but in reality, these guys don't build anything. They're in the people business. They're there to motivate the contractors, motivate the subcontractors, motivate the people that they're working with. They're not in the construction business, they're in the people business. And that was a light bulb that went off in my head behind all this